Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we're taking a look at Ty West's MaXXXine. The trilogy horror feature is finally here. We're excited to talk about it. We're also going to take a look at Problemista, a 2023 feature that we missed late last year, starring writer-director Julio Torres. Excited to talk about it. We're going to talk about some upcoming trailers, mainly some that dropped this week. Big budget features. All right, might be talking about that new Joseph Kosinski movie F1. Might be talking about that new Gladiator 2. You're going to have to stick around and find out. And before we get to all of it, we need to talk about the news. First story this week, The Devil Wears Prada is getting a sequel at Disney. Yes, you remember The Devil Wears Prada, Andy. Anne Hathaway and Meryl Streep. Right? Meryl Streep's in it.
Emily Blunt.
And a sneaky Emily Blunt, who wasn't a big deal then, but is now. Yes, they're all back. I think it's going to happen. Why is Devil Wears Prada getting a sequel? And more importantly, is it going to make any money?
It's tricky when you wait too long, but there's also a thing, if you wait long enough, it actually is a bit charming, because this is going to be out probably almost 20 years after the original. And when it's that long, our characters can make significant strides. When it's only like 5 or 6 years, it can't really be that different. But I think when it's a really long time, you can have your characters be really different. I've actually never seen this movie, but it's so popular and it's been such a part of the cultural cinema landscape for the last 20 years. I still know a lot about it, and I just know that Emily Blunt's character is going to be a rival to Meryl Streep's character, as Meryl Streep's character is kind of laments the death of print magazine. Emily Blunt's character is building a fashion empire, and so they will do fashion battle. That should be really good. That's a very cherished property. I know, so I'm sure that will be pretty successful.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about it earlier today. It's easy to be cynical and say, oh my God, another rote sequel. Ooh boy, another nostalgia property just getting greenlit for a streaming service. But for what it's worth, dude, Hollywood is not kind to older women in the industry. This seems like a layup for all three of them. Why not? Right? Go do Devil Wears Prada. You're going to get a bag. It's like Laura Dern showing up in those last 3 Jurassic World movies. Why not? Or the last one, I think. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
Why not turn out for that? Disney will make some money. It'll go on Disney Plus. Everybody will click on it. It'll do great. They'll say, oh, it did big. But whether it goes to theaters or not, I don't know. I don't know if it'll have the legs for that. But like you said, it's kind of a cultural thing. I've seen clips from Devil Wears Prada for a long time. I don't know. And while I have seen it once, I would say if we do cover it for the show, we should definitely watch the old one. I'd be definitely watch. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Another sequel coming down the pipe, Shrek 5. Oh boy, another Shrek, Andy. This got announced today? You just put
today,
this in the outline.
Not an hour ago.
Yeah.
Another Shrek, a 5th entry in the Shrek series will come out on July 1st, 2026, so about 2 years from now, with all the original cast returning: Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, 25 years after the original, which I remember seeing in theater, so that makes me feel crazy old as well. But I remember that being such a phenomenon. It was you had this animation that was different from Pixar, and storytelling that was really immersive and kind of mature, but also a little bit more edgy. There's fart jokes and kind of stuff. It wasn't quite Disney, and it's not Dreamscape, DreamWorks that's behind that franchise. So it's not surprising. And what I was saying before the show is that the success of both Inside Out 2 and the new Despicable Me 4 Minions movie, it's just family animation is super successful, and now it's all the studios are jumping on it.
Yeah, all joking aside from the quality of Shrek, whether or not you think it is a good or bad film, children or adult, one thing's for sure, it has been able to stay a part of the cultural conversation, at least among younger audiences, as they've come up through TikTok, the internet. Absurd number of Shrek memes, right? Clearly something about this franchise stuck around in a generation's heads, and it is going to pay dividends when DreamWorks premieres the 5th one in 2026. Yeah, Andy's right. Inside Out 2 just made $1 billion, and I didn't think that movie was going to make $1 billion at all. And if Disney's one sequel to a fine franchise is going to make that kind of money, imagine what Shrek 5 is going to make. They just did that Puss in Boots movie, and that movie did good. Like it's like a $1 billion idea. You just like you can imagine, somewhere in a DreamWorks boardroom, somebody's walking to a white room with a whiteboard and just wrote this down with like a bunch of money symbols next to it, and all the shareholders lost their minds.
The money sign is the S.
Yes, and then also the 5 has lines through it, and that makes it the money sign as well. Shrek money 5 money. It's too good of an idea. It's too good of an idea. One sequel that I think is coming down that may not do as good as Shrek, but still probably going to do fine. Conjuring 4. They're making another Conjuring movie, the final Conjuring movie. They say, Andy. I'm not caught up on any of these, but I know they continue making money. What do you know about the final Conjuring film?
This is set to come out September 5th, 2025. Of course, continues the semi-fictional, semi-real life of Ted and Elaine. I never get their names right. Ted and Elaine Warren.
I don't know.
John and Elaine
Warren. Yeah,
Ed
and Lorraine Warren, yes.
Thank you. Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were real life ghost hunters, and they've made these films based on like the Warren Files and like all this ghosty stuff. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga have been staples in this $1 billion franchise. I think it's actually made over $2 billion, and it's 3 movies that have not been great, but they make tons of money. It's very successful. The last one we did review on the show called The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It, which was really bad, but still made money. So it's no surprise that they're making another one. They've also had a couple of spin-offs, notably The Nun and Annabelle. So not surprised. Hopefully this will be the last one. They're probably tired of playing this character.
You're absolutely right, though. Over $2 billion globally. A couple spin-offs, like insane success for the Conjuring franchise. Not only do I not believe this is the last one, because this is how this works in Hollywood. You get something successful, you may bench it for a while, but eventually you're gonna dust off the cobwebs and bring that ghost back out. But more importantly, I was gonna dunk on this movie because I thought the last film was the one that Patrick Wilson had directed, and then Andy had to remind me before we got started here that actually Patrick Wilson's directorial debut was not in the Conjuring universe, but the Insidious universe, which is another series of horror films that he stars in, and that was Insidious: The Red Door, I think was the name of that movie.
Yes,
he did that one. That is unrelated to his work in The Conjuring. He's just an actor over here, as far as I know. So far be it from me to judge his work. I haven't seen the movie, but I should definitely get my Conjuring Insidious films straight. Different franchises, similar vibes, I think.
Yeah, they have an audience, and horror is cheap. That first Conjuring movie was made for $20 million, went on to make over $300 million, so huge return on it. It's, again, a very successful franchise made out of, something that has become legend because, these were real people. They did exist. They were alleged ghost hunters. They probably didn't find anything, but they had enough to just create some spooky lore and background and give us these movies.
Well, the big story this week that we got to talk about, and I'm hoping our dear Dr. Draper can help decipher for the rest of us, myself included, Paramount Pictures has been acquired or is acquiring Skydance Media. Skydance is acquiring Paramount. Whatever this is, it's some big like Succession level drama that me on the ground does not understand, but as a fan of Succession, thinks is probably rad. What is going on, Andy? What's happening? Paramount Pictures getting picked up?
So for the last few months, we've seen Paramount be courted by several suitors for possible merger or acquisition. Sony put in an offer, was rejected. Skydance had put in one. It was initially rejected, but after some revision, Paramount Global was finally agreed to be not sold to Skydance, but basically the controlling share in Skydance, which is owned by Sherry Redstone. And has been for a year, and she inherited that from her father, Sumner Redstone, who owned it for a long time. So Skydance is buying out a controlling share in Paramount, so it's a merger of sorts. And what that means is that they're going to own Paramount and everything Paramount owns, Paramount Plus, as well as cable channels like MTV, Nickelodeon, and Comedy Central. This is why we very suspiciously saw all of MTV and Comedy Central's content pulled from their websites, and it was likely because of all this behind-the-scenes wheeling and dealing. We don't really know what that means going forward. I have read that they will try to keep Paramount Plus alive and make it profitable, but there's a lot of very vague, like, oh, we're going to review audience tastes and cut down on production and reassess our strategy and strategize about our strategy. And there's a whole lot of that. We don't really have any details yet, but it looks like they're at least going to keep a hold of the streaming service.
It definitely seems like some investor speak. I was trying to make sense of it earlier in this quote from Sherry Redstone, owner of Skydance. I think probably nails a pretty good quote. Given the changes in the industry, we want to fortify Paramount for the future while ensuring that content remains king. Our hope is that that the Skydance transaction will enable Paramount's continued success in this rapidly changing environment. Now, I don't know how they're going to accomplish that, right? A little like Sony acquiring Alamo Drafthouse Theaters, right? Like, I don't know how they plan to turn Paramount Plus into a profitable venture. I'm going to be honest, as a recent unsubscriber from the service, I actually just unsubbed last night before we started doing the show because the story reminded me, oh yeah, I still have a Paramount subscription that I should probably kick because I don't use it. I thought that originally a lot of their offerings were unique. They had a deal with Showtime and A24, like to get a lot of exclusive stuff there. But now a lot of A24's work is over on HBO. It seems like a lot of their content's spread out in other places. They've been licensing out. I don't know how you bring people in. Like, nobody knows really how to solve the streaming problem here. How do you get your audience to come back into the tent and stay there and feel like your service is worth the price of admission over others? I don't really know what Skydance's plan is to accomplish this. Obviously, some coordination in media, right? Like tighten up the library a little bit, offer people something that they want to watch. But I don't know. It just seems like a whole lot of big investor speak to me, right? And I think that's kind of what this is. I think.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's about who controls how much of these shares and those shares, and what investors you have to buy out and how much they pay, and it's a whole lot of kind of boring financials. But the big takeaway is Skydance is merging with Paramount and will have a controlling stake in it, and we don't really know what that means for any of their properties or anything just yet, but I'm sure we'll get details soon.
I'll tell you where I didn't see boring financials this weekend. It's at the box office. Dude, Despicable Me 4 is out, and it is killing it with a $122 million opening. Not to mention, this cherry little horror movie, Maxine, we're about to talk about, did pretty good itself for being a low-budget horror. What's going on at the box office, Andy?
So it's a big, successful 4th of July weekend with Despicable Me 4. Contrast to last year's Indiana Jones 5 movie, which is a big bomb. So it's nice to see some success over the holiday weekend. Like I said, $122 million for Despicable Me 4. That's $76 million just over the three-day weekend, with Inside Out 2 coming in second and crossing the $1.2 billion mark. Who knows how it could go? Could it be 1.3, 1.5? It just keeps going. I'm blanking on all these. Bad Boys Ride or Die continues to stay in the top 5, hitting over 300 million globally. Very successful for that. Maxine, which we're going to talk about here, came up a little short. They were hoping for about 8 million, came in at 6.5, but still the most successful of the three of these horror movies. And I think it was still made on a low budget, so it's still gonna probably turn a profit. And then the Sound of Hope faith-based film, which they have a gross typo in this article. Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot, about a family who adopts like 22 children, didn't really make a big sound, and and was not very successful. It was trying to recreate the success of Sound of Freedom from last summer, which opened a huge amount and went on to be a big surprise success. So that's the box office for this weekend.
Yeah, that Sound of Hope movie looks like it had an uphill battle, if anything, because it's running against Horizon. And I'm going to be honest, Horizon, I think, is going to draw a lot of that Sound of Freedom crowd. Kind of around the same time. One. Yeah, like I think if I was going to go support a film with my hard-earned dollars, like, and I only go see a movie every couple of months, I would probably be more prone to see like Kevin Costner's like sweeping Western epic over like the kind of spiritual sequel, whatever, in tone at least, to Sound of Freedom, Sound of Hope. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of ads for it. We do a movie podcast. Like I don't know a lot about it, but I do think it runs into some problems there. Otherwise, glad to hear Maxine's doing good, man. Like, we talk a lot on this show about budgets and how outrageous some studios, like Disney, are to like how often they are prone to like letting film budgets just wildly inflate. Andy mentioned Indiana Jones last summer, like $300 million picture. How in God's name does it cost that much money to make a movie? When you go small, you can get big results and you can get sequels greenlit by like keeping a budget tight. And Ty West seems to know how to do that. Like, all of these movies have been low budgets. They only continue to make more money. Yeah, 6.7 million doesn't seem like that much off the top, but would it only cost you a couple million to make your feature? You're immediately turning profit. You're immediately in the green right off the jump. You know what I mean? Everything from here on out, every weekend, every ticket, every DVD, every VOD, every stream is nothing but profit. That's great. That's a lesson I think everybody could learn. Meanwhile, Despicable Me just going to continue being a monster. You think a billy, Andy? You think it's going to a billion? Maybe.
I mean, it's off to the start to meet that, which would be nuts. These family focused animated features are just killing this summer.
It turns out peak cinema is actually animated children's features. You might not know it, but we figured it out right here on episode 259 of Off Script. Like, that's the secret. Just animated family features, billion-dollar features. That's where cinema's going. Everything else outside of that is just dust in the wind. But in the meantime, we got to get on to bigger things in cinema. We got to talk about big movies, and I'm very excited to talk about this next feature. I'm going to be taking the summary on this, so please excuse my clumsy delivery. The movie is Ty West's Maxine. So, it's 1985, and there's a killer on the loose in LA, the Night Stalker that everybody's terrified of, except, of course, Maxine Minx, a former adult film star turned Hollywood darling, or at least she hopes to as she attends auditions in Hollywood. Maxine is looking for her big break. She wants to get out of the adult industry and into the formal Hollywood star industry. And even though there's this guy in the loose, she's not going to let that get to her. What might get to her is a mysterious message from her past when a VHS tape arrives at her door one night with footage from an investigation in Texas. Yes, that movie X that came out just a couple years ago is hot on Maxine's trail. And though she might be able to escape the events of the film, she may not be able to escape her destiny. This is following Pearl that came out, just last year, I think, from Ty West.
2022 from both of them.
Yes, 2 years ago. God, it's hard to believe those both came out in the same year. It was a wild thing getting to the end of X and seeing a teaser for Pearl. It was a wild thing getting to the end of Pearl and seeing a teaser for Maxine. This weird, wonderful trio of horror films that Ty West has put together have finally all come out. We've seen the end of it now, and I'm very excited to talk about what happens. No spoilers, of course, here on this podcast, but we'll keep it tight for you. Andy, what did you think of Maxine?
So this was a lot of fun. Ty West has so much style in his movies, and the previous two were movies made in a certain style. X is the 70s exploitation film. Pearl is in the style of that Gone with the Wind kind of classic cinema, super saturated, bright colors. And Maxine is the 80s B movie slasher film brought to life. We have a lot of fun characters. We have a lot of characters in this movie. There's a lot of plots going on. Some people might say there's too many, but we have these fun characters of like the Night Stalker is going on. People are getting murdered. She's trying to make this movie happen. There's cops asking questions. There's a detective trying to find her. She's got her lawyer / agent / whatever, played brilliantly by Giancarlo Esposito. It's a lot of fun. There's just so much going on, and I've been so excited for this. Lots to talk about. There's some things that I think don't quite work. It's got some issues, but overall, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Maxine is really a funny sort of feature because it has to ride in on the precedence of its previous two entries in the franchise, right? X comes out and it is this like almost cabin in the woods style horror, or I should say cabin in Texas Chainsaw Massacre horror feature, big slasher send up, right? Exciting, visceral. Pearl comes out and it's this like huge throwback to like the royal loyal days of Hollywood, right? Like bright colors, Wizard of Oz, like 1930s, like very exciting. And now Maxine doesn't have the luxury of a set built in New Zealand, right? We do not have the house that we can return to from the 2 previous entries. We have to be somewhere new. We have to be somewhere different. Where does Ty West go with this? I think a lot of people have been on the timeline saying it doesn't work. It's too weird. It's too odd. The third act doesn't stick it. I disagree. I think this movie's cool. I think this is a unique send-up of B movies. I think there's something special here. And I think that Ty West has dug into what has made his career work to this point and partnered with Mia Goth to make something that I believe time will be kind to. I think people will look back on Maxine and go, actually, that was kind of a cool movie. There's some really cool ideas in here. And although it is different, I think it has to be. And I think if you know that going in, you're not going to be disappointed. I don't know where the best place to start talking about it is. I don't want to get too much into the plot, but I do want to talk about this like neon-soaked 1985 Hollywood, where it is like everybody is full of cheesy lines. And being in LA, of course, everyone's an actor, everyone's an actress, and Maxine Minx finds herself uniquely separated from the rest of the world because she's involved in the seedy underbelly of Hollywood, right? She works at a strip club during days, and during nights she's shooting footage for other stuff that we can't talk about on a podcast. And then like just in between that, she's trying to get in and audition wherever she can. She's got a friend who works at the local video store, right? They watch goofy old horror movies on VHS. She's got friends in the industry who are trying to invite her to big parties up in the Hollywood Hills. She's not doing any of it because she's going to be a star. It's her destiny, right? Like that's the way it's going to be. This like driving force of us running with Maxine towards greatness is kind of a fascinating thing because she's got a sordid past. If you've seen X, you know, like she comes from a place where maybe we should be looking twice at her. And she ends up being this really fascinating character that's got this presentation. She's performing for other people and she's performing for us. Like, I think that's a really exciting thing to kind of step into because we haven't seen Maxine in a couple years, right? She's not in Pearl. Like, Pearl is about functionally a different character. The spirit of the protagonist, I think, is the same through all of these, but the place and the people are very different.
Right. It's a town that will chew you up and spit you out. She meets Elizabeth Bender, played by Elizabeth Debicki, who's the director of this film that Maxine has won an audition to, and she's kind of mentoring her, and she's telling her like, you just got to be fierce. You can't, you only get one shot at this kid. You can't mess it up. And there's an interesting parallel where Maxine is trying to go from adult films into mainstream, and Elizabeth Bender, the director, is trying to go from these kind of sleazy B movies into more mainstream films. Like she says, I want to make a B movie with A ideas, she says early on. And so it's an interesting parallel where they're both trying to make this kind of career shift. But Maxine is dealing with a lot of death. There's people dropping like flies around her, which is what gets the police involved. There's like some people that work in her industry turn up dead. Is it the Night Stalker? You're the common denominator. What do you know? The police are played by Michelle Monaghan and
Bobby Cannavale, right? Cannavale?
Yeah, and they're it's so great because so much of this movie is archetypes, and like so you have these two hard-nosed detectives, and it's a great comedy bit because they're doing the 80s cop thing, trying to be rough, trying to play good cop, bad cop. And that's an interesting storyline. You have Kevin Bacon playing the PI who's on Maxine's on her trail, he's almost the best person in this movie. Like,
it's amazing.
He is chewing the scenery. He's got this thick Louisiana drawl. I'm after you, and you better come home with me, darling. He's so good in this, and there's a mystery that, like, part of what this movie is. It's a mystery of who's pulling the strings, who's paying the PI, who's killing the people, who's going on. So there's a mystery going on in the background, but we have a really great cast of characters and a lot of plot lines kind of interweaving. It may be a little bit too many. It kind of depends on your own interpretation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed a lot of the comedy in this movie. Like, I know it's a horror and that comes with it, but Maxine is like uniquely positioned where Pearl didn't have so much room to do that. X is funny, I think, where it needs to be. Like, part of its trappings of this like adult film crew like coming to this house is, sets up some situations. But Maxine is like really funny. Like Bobby Cannavale as Detective Torres like has all these like absurdly goofy lines. He's like this hyper masculine guy. At one point he's talking to Maxine and he's like, "Why you look like a broad at a bus stop?" or so. Like it's so goofy. And meanwhile, like her agent Giancarlo Esposito has like this horrible wig on purpose. And it's like so nice to see him not playing Gus Fring for a change, right? And like
Yes. Oh my
playing this
God,
like
thank you.
seedy agent who's like smoking cigarettes and he's on his exercise bike in his office with a stupid 80s headset. And yes, Kevin Bacon might be like, he might steal every scene he's in. He's so over the top. I swear it's the best acting I've seen Bacon do in years. He absolutely understands the assignment. He is supposed to be this like hyper reflection of a PI. Everybody in this movie is. There's this great scene early in the film when Maxine is walking down Hollywood Boulevard and she passes these 3 storefronts, right? She's just come out of her shift working at an adult theater, we'll say. And she walks by 3 storefronts in a row. One is a bunch of dudes doing karate, like right at the window. A bunch of guys in gis, like punching. Next one's army recruitment. Bunch of guys going to war, right? Like signing up. We're going to go be men. And the last one is a bunch of televisions in a television repair shop that are all running footage of the evening news, and they're talking about this Night Stalker character who's relatively central to the plot, I think, in theme and tone and spirit. But as far as like the actual Night Stalker, you don't have to worry about them till later in the film, thank God. We spend a lot more time with Maxine with what she's got going on and her hustle. But I like that this world features people who are like turned up. You know what I mean? Like just like Maxine and her friends are like hyper feminine. A lot of the dudes in this world are hyper masculine. Everything's turned up. Everything's a little over the top, and everybody's performing because like it's Los Angeles and everybody's doing a performance. Even Bobby Cannavale's inspector character talks about, oh yeah, I wanted to be an actor and performing and like. It's goofy in like just the right way. It manages to sit in this place of tone that is comfortable and welcoming and uniquely different from the other two in the franchise, rounding out what feels like a really good horror trilogy. Like I'm surprised at how many people said this one doesn't stick the landing because I think it totally does.
Right, I think so as well. I want to talk a little bit about Bobby Cannavale has got this great recurring gag where he plays bad cop and he just kind of goes over the top, starts yelling. And then when Maxine leaves, his partner's like, "Nah, it was a little over the top." It's like he's acting. He's like still acting even as a cop. Let's not forget that this is a horror feature, and the horror is that there is someone killing people around Maxine. Couple of her friends end up dead. There's some grisly murders, 80s style gore and slashing going on. So she's trying to stay alive and also shoot this movie, be there, learn her part, show up on time, all those things. But we get, it's not really scary, but it is, again, it's more stylistic. It's about the 80s. Her friend lives or works in this video store / sex shop. And he's reading Fangoria magazine. He's got a bunch of VHS tapes. Like he's totally like that stereotypical like horror nerd of the 80s and of today. But we it's kind of fun, campy horror. It's not super scary.
No, and I like so much of the set dressing too. Like you may have heard in interviews or seen in the trailer, like a brief flash of like the Bates Motel from Hitchcock's Psycho. That actually has a bit of a feature in here, which is kind of honestly like a clever reflection. If you can't get the house from X and you can't get the house from Pearl, what other like thing could we kind of send up in this movie to like give it some tone and give it some shape? And like getting the house from Psycho is pretty rad, even if it's like part of a studio tour thing, which I think speaks to the subversive nature of this film as a presentation of film. This movie is a presentation of B-movie ideas and B-movie culture and old horror. I love the video store. Yeah, with like its goofy neon lights and like Andy said, like the adult section in the back, which is really funny. There's even a great sequence where Kevin Bacon's PI character kind of chases Maxine through like a bunch of back studio lots, and they're like running through like a town square, and then they run through like a couple of skyscraper building, like just real goofy, like, and just really feels a bit like a movie about making movies, not in the way that Damien Chazelle's Babylon does, but I think in a way that is meaningful to Ty West and Mia Goth, who produced this feature. Like between the three of them, continuum. I can't believe how far we've run with what otherwise I thought was just going to be a one-off horror movie, X, starring Mia Goth in 2022. Like, it's crazy. Like, I can't believe how far we've come. Oh, great music, by the way. Great needle drops and great soundtrack.
It's really interesting how much cinema plays a part in each of the three stories. In X, it's this they're shooting adult films, and that's they hope to make it big, to not do let's get our foot in the industry this way and then kind of move on from there. In Pearl, she meets the projectionist played by David Cordsweat, and it exposes her to her first cinema, and she sees those girls on screen and she says, I want to be that, I want to be dancing up there. And in this, of course, she's gone in the movies now, she's taken the next step. So it's a really interesting way and kind of love letter to film and cinema.
Yeah. I don't want to say too much more about it. I think I about said my piece. Andy, any other thoughts for recommendations?
Just some criticisms I've heard. It's interesting because some people have absolutely loved Maxine. Some people saying it's the best in the series. Some people saying it's the worst in the series. Some people saying it's the worst movie of all time. Some people the best movie. Like, it's been very kind of divisive, and it's interesting to see where people rank. Some people are like, oh, Maxine is first, or Maxine is second, or Maxine is third. It's really different depending on who you ask. I think my only criticism is there's a few too many plot lines going on. We have Maxine winning this audition. We have the Night Stalker. We have the police. We have Giancarlo Esposito's character. We got the PI. So there's a little bit too much going on. I think it will probably work better on rewatch when you kind of understand how all the threads fit together. But it is that LA remind me a little bit of Mulholland Drive, in some ways, that LA noir style kind of film.
Yeah, and I like that each one feels uniquely on its own, but when you watch them later, I think I'll be drawn to checking out more. I immediately walking out of it, especially with a lot of the like running around the backlot stuff in this feature. I thought a lot of the Back to the Future series, right? Robert Zemeckis trilogy of films, and those are obviously very different. Those feature the same characters going to different places, but the idea of going to like different places in different times and different settings and having the same like core set of beliefs and same kind of ideologies running through all three of your movies like fits here. And just like when I watch the first Back to the Future film and want to immediately roll into the next two, I feel that this October, when I'm doing my horror movie rewatch and I hit X, I'm probably going to roll right into Pearl and then just want to watch Maxine after that. Like they feel intrinsically connected, but perfectly fine apart, I think. Actually, I'd say that, but I take it back. I do think you should probably watch X before you watch Maxine. I do think you are benefiting from that. Yeah, there is some pretty direct correlations between those two movies, whereas Pearl kind of stood on its own. If you haven't seen X before you go see Maxine, not required, would recommend if you have the ability, I think. And also, it's just a good movie and it's a good time. So with that, any other thoughts or recommendations, Andy?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Maxine?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this all year. We got lots of style. We got Ty West back doing his horror thing, doing tributes to the 80s, to cinema, to slashers, to B movies. Mia Goth is incredible again as Maxine Minx. We have a bigger cast than we've had with Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth Debicki, Giancarlo Esposito, Lily Collins, Halsey. So many people. It's a lot of fun. There's a little bit too much going on at times, but like I said, I think that might get better on rewatch. But highly recommend, especially for horror fans.
Yeah, same boat for me. Would recommend. I think it's a good time. I think people on the timeline who were like, Maxine doesn't make it. Oh no, a blunder at the end. Wrong. I think you're looking at it all wrong. I didn't know what to expect exactly when I walked into Pearl. I didn't know what exactly to expect when I walked into X. And I think some people maybe walk into Maxine with expectations. And like, I think if we've learned anything over Ty West making these three movies is that you shouldn't expect any one thing from any of them. They're all doing something different. They're all saying something new. I think it's exciting. I think it's been a great body of work. I'm a little bummed, honestly, that I'm not going to get to see Mia Goth reprise this role or this character anytime soon. I never say never in Hollywood, but for what it's worth, I'm excited to see what Ty West does next. I'm excited to see what Mia Goth does next. Stunning end to a stunning film franchise. Rock solid work in Maxine. And now we got to talk about some trailers. Couple upcoming ones. Excited to get to these. These trailers dropped this week. I'm going to take the first one. Andy's going to take the second one. Then we will jump into Problemista. Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the trailer park.
So the first trailer we're talking about is F1. Yeah, that new Brad Pitt movie from Joseph Kosinski, the director of Tron Legacy and more recently Top Gun Maverick. You might have heard it's Top Gun Maverick in cars, and guess what? It is. We now have a teaser for F1 set to a Queen soundtrack. We get Brad Pitt at an event. He hops in a car. He's racing. Car shot, car shot, car shot. And I'm going to be honest, it looks good. Looks really good, actually. And you might think it looks a little bit like Top Gun Maverick, and that's because it's very similar. It's the same director. It's the same writer. I think it's the same I actually don't think it's the same cinematographer. It is like so similar in presentation to what they were doing in the cockpits of F-14s and F-18s and God knows what planes they had in Top Gun Maverick. Now we're just doing that in F1 cars. And most importantly, not only do we have Brad Pitt at the helm instead of Tom Cruise, but apparently Kosinski and crew have had all of the permissions in the world to shoot this at official F1 events. They have got all kinds of incredible footage, cars, nuts stuff. And I heard the budget in this film was ballooning to $300 million. Not so. Kosinski says it's less than that, though we don't have an exact number. He said that's junk. I don't know how much this movie costs to make. It looks real good. It sounds real good. And for a teaser, it looks like it's going to be a good time. Andy, what do you think?
So whenever Top Gun Maverick was coming out, we were dead wrong about this. We thought it was going to be a bomb. We didn't think anyone would be interested, but we did say that it would probably look good. Like they would get the cameras, mount them on the planes, fly all around, and probably it's going to feel like a ride. And so it came to pass. And that's exactly what we're doing in this movie. We got cameras on cars. We're going around turns. We're speeding up. We're looking at the drivers, behind the drivers. And again, it's trying to recreate that feeling like you're on the track, like you're in the car. It's going to be a great experience, probably. It's very it's going to be your dad's favorite movie of 2025. It's very light on plot. We don't get anything about the conflict. The byline is that Brad Pitt's Sonny Hayes, kind of retired F1 driver, comes out of retirement to train a new, very similar plot to Top Gun Maverick, comes back to train a young generation of drivers. But man, those cameras looks good. Like they have the cameras on the cars going around the track, and I guarantee you in a theater you're gonna probably get nauseous. We're talking about buying D-box seats, getting thrown around in the cinema. It's gonna be a good time.
That's right. If I don't leave that movie theater with my drink all over me, I'm gonna be disappointed. It's coming out summer 2025. Let's keep it here on Off Script for more about F1. One other trailer to talk about this week, Andy. What do we got?
Gladiator 2, Coliseum Boogaloo. No, it's just Gladiator 2. Trailer dropped today, this morning. This has been very much anticipated. This is director Ridley Scott's long follow-up to 2000's Gladiator. This is coming out around Thanksgiving, I think the 22nd week before Thanksgiving. Gladiator, let me take you back to hallowed antiquity to steal a line from the original Gladiator. Came out in 2000, May 5th. Huge, kind of a sleeper hit. Like, people didn't really know a lot about this movie, and that was before a whole, internet movie talk, film Twitter existed. It ended up being the movie of the summer. Won Best Picture. Russell Crowe won Best Actor. It was a huge cultural deal, the Sword and Sandal, and we haven't really had a lot of good Sword and Sandal epics since then. Gladiator 2 follows the child of Connie Nielsen's Lucilla, Lucius, who is now grown up, played by Paul Mescal. We don't know where he is, how he's in this predicament, but he's back in the Coliseum. He is a gladiator. He must fight for his life, for the lives of other. And this trailer looks incredible. We see these big battles. There's a battle with there's a rhinoceros. There's boat battles because they used to fill the Coliseum with water and reenact naval battles, and they're doing this. They've recreated this for the thing. Denzel Washington is in this, absolutely scene chewing. He's some sort of middleman merchant, gladiator merchant of sorts, up to no good, probably like ethically ambiguous character. We have a new emperor in Joseph Quinn, who's really crazy looking in this. This guy only can turn it up to 11 in everything I've seen him in so far. We, of course, just saw him in A Quiet Place Day One. This looks really good. This is probably going to be a big hit. Your dad's favorite movie of 2024.
Yeah, if you can get your dad out to go see it, right? Like if your dad's not going to end up waiting for streaming services. Yeah, no, Gladiator 2 looks like a great time. Yeah, seeing this next to F1, it does seem like it's going to be dad summer, but this comes out in November, not next summer like F1 does. I think it's going to be a hit for Ridley Scott. And like I was telling Andy before we started the show, like I've liked Ridley Scott's last like 3 features by themselves. Napoleon's great. Last Duel is super underrated. Like I think this seems like it's going to be a banger just between the people who knew the previous and, people want to go see something different, some big gladiator armor, big combat, big cast, like big crew, big set. Why not? Why not? Gladiator 2 seems like a layup. Seems like a great idea on paper. Like, and I remember when I first heard about Gladiator 2, I thought, God, that seems so dumb. That seems so dumb. They're going to make a sequel to Gladiator. I'm looking at the trailer. It just looks like it's going to make a lot of money. Like, just seems like a big idea. Seems like I'm going to go see this on a big screen. Seems like it'll be a lot of fun. And that's Gladiator 2. Yeah, November. This year, right? This can be the Thanksgiving joint. Ideally, you would be going. Yeah, this is what all the dads are going to be going to see on Thanksgiving when all the moms are at Wicked and Moana 2. So yeah, that's going to be the thing, and that's Gladiator 2. Anyway, what's next? I guess we got one more movie to talk about on the podcast. Andy's going to be taking the summary on this one. Andy, please take it away.
Problemista. So this is a 2023 release that just came out on Max, starring Tilda Swinton and writer-director and starring in Julio Torres as Alejandro. Julio Torres, who I didn't really know before this, has done a lot of TV. He was a writer for SNL for like 8 years, has a two TV shows on HBO. This is his directorial debut, and Julio Torres plays Alejandro, who's an immigrant from El Salvador, I believe, and he works at, this story is kind of a sci-fi story as well as kind of a coming of age thing, but he works for this cryo sleep company, where an artist played by RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, who plays this artist who finds out he has terminal cancer and decides to freeze himself, and then leaves his widow, played by Tilda Swinton, to come up with the funds to keep him frozen, to be thought out sometime in the future. Very kind of bizarre setup. Alejandro has to balance a lot of things. He actually gets fired right away from this cryo sleep company, and his visa will lapse and he will have to be deported if he doesn't find a new sponsor. This is where he runs into Tilda Swinton's character, Elizabeth, hoping to help her do a show, sell the paintings, earn the money to keep her husband frozen, and also sponsor his visa. He's also just having to deal with the money and kind of the catch-22 nature of the system. For instance, he needs to earn money to pay the lawyer, but he's not allowed to earn money while he doesn't have a visa, and so he has to end up taking all these shady cash jobs on Craigslist. This is also set in like the 2000s, 2010s era, so all the technology is about 10-15 years older, so he's having to balance all these things, and it's a funny movie. There's a lot of kind of supernatural sequences, or like things in your brain. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of everywhere. Zach, what'd you think?
In the review for Problemista, a slate called Problemista, a hilarious twist on the American dream. And I think that's mostly true. Being an A24 joint, Problemista is going to be relatively grounded, but also pretty high concept. And that's what we get here. In its best moments, it reminds me a little of something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. In its worst moments, it reminds me of like Nicolas Cage's dream scenario, right? Like it's a world where everybody is pretty much grounded, but the ideas that we're dealing with are uniquely huge. And Julio Torres' character, Alejandro, is uniquely positioned here as a toy creator who wants to make toys that are derivative of what already exists, right? He doesn't want to make an all-new thing. He wants to make a snake in a can that has a little sign that says, "Sorry, I scared you." He doesn't want to make a new American Girl doll or a Barbie. He wants to take a Barbie that already exists and cross its fingers and put it behind it, so it's like it's never really being honest. Like he wants to he wants to create toys that teach kids about a world that is the same as the one we know, but has a different perspective and a different personality. And that extends to much of the film because this is based very much on Julio Torres's life, as far as we can tell. Coming up, Julio Torres is vegan, like Alejandro, is gay, like Alejandro, is an immigrant, like Alejandro, and lived in New York taking Craigslist jobs, like Alejandro. All of that seems to be very, very particular to the world that Julio Torres inhabits and extends to their other works like this show they have on HBO, Phantasmus. Andy's right. Julio was an SNL writer. I did learn, fun fact, I think the most notable sketch that Julio Torres wrote is Papyrus, the Ryan Gosling bit. Yeah, that's a Julio Torres joint. I know, yeah. So when you think, boy, who came up with this as an idea? That's who we're getting this from. And what's amazing, I think, about Problemista is the scale of it, because there's a lot of people involved in this that see the potential that Julio has, like, and what's coming down the pipe for them. Like, this is obviously a first-time feature from an up-and-coming director, up-and-coming writer who's got a lot going on. They have an HBO special. Tilda Swinton is in this feature. A24 has produced it, even though it is their first. It's his first feature. They're all in on him. Like, it seems like things are going well in the world of Julio Torres, but the world of Alejandro could not be more complicated. And I do think, uniquely, that if there is one thing that makes this movie a bit of a tough watch, I think it's its pacing. I think it is slow in times when it doesn't need to be slow, and the jokes don't quite land in the places they need to. Maybe a rewatch would be a better angle on it, because I do think it's unique. I do like this world. I do like what Alejandro is doing in it, and I actually really like Tilda Swinton's like absolute stress ball mess of a character. Good God, she's hard to deal with. But also, like, I just think it's a tough watch, and it's a little long in the tooth in places where it doesn't need to be. And I think part of that is because it's so personal, and because it's such a dedicated thing that Julio's working on in writing, directing, and starring in this film. Boy, that felt like a really, really long answer, Andy. I'm really sorry. Where do you want to pivot here?
Yeah, I felt like it. Again, he's a sketch writer largely, and that's what this feels like. This movie kind of feels like TV in a lot of ways, and like it doesn't fit together as a whole, but there's individual sections that are funny, that are entertaining, like the bit about Craigslist, and there's this like there's a guy who he's literally credited as Craigslist because he's like he's Craigslist come to life, and he's like, come do this disgusting job for $5 an hour in cash. So there's things like that that are funny. It just, the pacing is off. It's a little bit too long, and it ends twice. It's got that Return of the King problem. This should probably be a hot 90 minutes, and it's a little bit longer than that. I think it had a lot of potential. Tilda Swinton's character is just this hurricane of a personality. She can never be pleased. She's always yelling at everyone. Julio Torres is the opposite. He's very kind of reserved, very meek. He's kind of a pushover, bit of a people pleaser, and they kind of eventually, they bond and they learn from each other throughout the film. It's a little bit too long, and the pacing just doesn't. I agree, it doesn't quite work.
I think it works really good on the page. Like, I remember seeing the trailer for this and being wildly charmed just by the opening trailer, because we have the story of this artist mom who works in El Salvador, I believe, and has a son who she loves, Alejandro, and he goes out into the world where he meets a big scary monster, right? That's bad, and he wears blue and the monster wears red. And this is a vision she has of her son. And then we flash forward to Alejandro, her real son, not going into the woods to fight a monster, but moving to New York City, where he's an immigrant and he's gay and he's vegan and he's broke and like cannot get a job. And like, he's so meek and he's such a pushover and a coward. And it's so funny because the world just walks all over Alejandro. And then, of course, Alejandro meets Elizabeth, Tilda Swinton's red-clad, fiery, wildly stressful individual who desperately needs a personal assistant because she wants to continue leading her lavish lifestyle and having her estate in Maine and going to art things, but she cannot keep up with the technology and trappings of the modern world. She desperately needs a personal assistant. She freaks out whenever she's on the phone. She tells people they're screaming at him when they're not. Like, she cannot hold it together. She looks she's about to lose her mind at any second. And she is a ticking time bomb in this movie in every scene. And Alejandro is forced to kind of like reckon with that. But rather than see Elizabeth for this evil monster that everybody else sees her as, like his toys, like the world in which Alejandro resides, like he sees her as something unique and special and different, and honestly, maybe a force for good in places where a little pressure may need to be applied. Like maybe that will inspire Alejandro in his life and in the things he does. And like, I think there's some really cool lessons to be taken from there. I uniquely for a time worked as not an assistant, but a producer on a radio show for a woman that is kind of a lot like Elizabeth. And like, it was stressful just watching her bits. Cause I was like, oh God, I remember this person in my life who was like this. So like they pick up their phone and they like tap at it with their finger really sharply and they yell about things randomly, like just like a grenade at any one time, landmine of a person. Like we'll freak out for anything, we'll start yelling at somebody over nothing, like just a monster to deal with. And seeing her and Alejandro like bounce off each other is definitely, I think, the meat of the feature. Like that's where you're going to get your most enjoyment is watching these two. But it does also alternatively make for a watch where you have somebody who's very quiet and not very talkative and kind of is just a punching bag for the whole movie. And Elizabeth, who is difficult to watch because she's so aggressive and such a nightmare to deal with. Like it makes for an interesting tightrope to walk for a first feature for a first time director, I think. And I think that's where a lot of our pacing issues come in.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that I think do work. Like the overall setup and plot, I think are strong. It's a strong idea. We have very strong characters, but just our through line, our kind of development, everything just kind of gets worse and worse for Alejandro throughout the whole movie. Like he's struggling with money. He eventually has to rent out his room and sleep on the couch to try and make ends meet. It seems like it's never going to really turn around for him. And there's lots of conflicts. Of course, she has upset a whole lot of people. Greta Lee makes an appearance in this, which is fun. I did like the look of and feel of the city because it feels like New York City, not like the Hollywood version. It's like everyone's apartment is small, it's cramped, everything's like busy and bustling. It's like from the perspective of someone who lives there.
Yes, and like alternatively, I like what the movie has to say about the idea of low art and high art. Like nobody ever says it. Like we see a ton of art galleries featuring statues and paintings and wonderful ideas in mixed media that all look very abstract and all look very weird and all look very strange. And then meanwhile, like the thing Alejandro wants to pursue, like getting a job at a toy factory and producing their own toys, like are these like odd, unique reflections of toys that already exist. Meanwhile, like Elizabeth's art, her husband's art that she's trying to sell is like so uniquely wrote. It's these like egg paintings that all look the same and don't mean anything. And they can't get anybody to look at them because they just don't care. And I think the movie has a lot to say about how you perceive art and how people perceive your art and how you're willing to put a piece of yourself out there, a piece of yourself into the things that you make, and understand that the criticism that may come back from that may feel like a reflection of you or your loved one or the people who made it, but it isn't. Like, and that's not the way to look at the world, that everybody's unique, that everybody's different, that everyone's got a story, right? That everyone comes from somewhere. Like that like emotional heartstring that runs through this is strong and feels good. And I think it has a lot to say. It's just over an hour and 44 minutes, right? And like, that feels like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely does.
I did want to talk about briefly this other thing, this framing device of this imaginary fight between Alejandro, like a knight, and Elizabeth, who's like this Hydra monster character. It's a visual they cut to a few times, and it's solid, and it's low budget and like costume department in the way that like I think is charming. It's effective filmmaking. Like I think it's If anything, I think the only problem in those segments is maybe like better lens choice, better lighting. Otherwise, like I think they work fine. I think it's creative. It's a good visual way to show Alejandro having this kind of like metaphysical fight with this like chaotic force that he struggles to understand and work through, so he can get what he needs to get his visa to immigrate. Like it's a whole thing, but like I do think that works good for the most part. I think this works fine. I think Andy's right. Like I think it's just a little long in the tooth. I think that's its biggest crime.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And that's Problemista. Any other thoughts or recommendations, Andy?
I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Problemista?
I say it's perfect for streaming, which it's already on. You can find it on Max. I had to watch it in two parts because, like I said, just kind of gets a little slow. But there are a lot of funny bits. There's a lot of good issues that are brought up, like it's talk about issues of identity, of immigration, the struggles, also art, and a little bit of sci-fi. You could see a lot of Torres's sketch writing in this. Sometimes it feels a little bit more like TV than film, but I think it's a really good start, and I'd love to see what he does next.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think it's a good start. I think it's probably a strong start, especially considering like the studio involved in this and the people involved in it and the talent that's like involved in this project. Like clearly everybody sees the potential in Julio Torres, and like having seen none of their previous work, this being just the first one that I jump into, like I see that potential too. And though this project may not be like the perfect reflection of what's possible in the mind of Julio Torres, like I think this is a really great start, and I'm looking forward to what they do next. And that's Problemista. Glad we watched it. Actually, a double feature for A24 this week on episode 259 of Off Script, Andy. Both A24 features.
Look at that.
Doesn't happen every day. What are we watching next week?
So next week, big weekend in horror. We're going to be watching Longlegs, which is the long-anticipated horror movie starring Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage. We don't really know too much about this other than it's a little bit like Zodiac, David Fincher's film from the 2000s, which is a detective on the hunt for a serial killer. And this has been very terrifying, or it's been described as terrifying. People are like, it's changing my life. It's so scary. So we're going to try to temper our expectations, but that's going to be the big one. And then we're also going to be taking a look way back to 1996's Twister, starring Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. And we're in anticipation of Twisters, the kind of spiritual sequel that comes out on the 19th. Also, FYI, release Fly Me to the Moon, the rom-com starring Scarlett Johansson and, man, I'm blanking on the other guy's
Channing Tatum. Channing Tatum. Yes, of course.
Channing Tatum. In the rom-com of Going to the Moon, he plays an astronaut. She's a marketing person who's got to sell the moon to the American public, so they're continuing to get funding. That looks like a fake movie. I think that's probably going to bomb. And also upcoming, again, Twisters on July 19th and Deadpool and Wolverine July 26th.
Dude, Fly Me to the Moon does not look like it's going to make a lot of money, and I feel bad because like I love ScarJo fine, and actually I think Channing Tatum's pretty solid too. Like good comedy chops on that guy. It just doesn't. It looks like a fake movie. You're right. Like it looks like it doesn't even look real. It's the weirdest thing. Meanwhile, like I think Longlegs is gonna be a fun time, and I never saw Twister singular. Yeah, I never saw it. So excited to check that out. I know it's a banger. It's one of those movies you'd like say at a party, "Hey, I never saw that movie," and somebody would be like, "You never saw Twister?" Like one of those movies.
yeah.
The Matrix or Star Wars or Indiana Jones, right? Like Twister was a cultural institution. I'm excited to dig into it next week. If you want to dig into it with us, find out what we think of Twister or that movie Longlegs coming down the pipe. Keep up with movie news, all the usual stuff we do on the podcast. Best way to do that is just subscribe to Off Script. Subscribe to Off Script Film Review on your favorite video or audio platform, wherever you're checking us out right now, and we will get that new episode straight to you every single Tuesday when we do them, of course. We're available on YouTube. You can find episodes of Off Script, individual reviews, clips, lots of big things going on YouTube. Come sub over there. Check us out. Things are growing. I'm telling you, things are happening over there. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual social media places. You can follow us there as well. Rate, comment, review, subscribe, like, follow. Just just the social media things that you do. Oh, we're on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartMedia, Amazon Music, I think, is where you can listen to the show. So if you're listening now, shout out to you. Love our listeners. We appreciate you guys. And, of course, you can check out our website, offscriptfilmreview.com. You can mail us correspondence directly from you to us, from fan to creator, subscriber to publisher at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com, our official email address. From all of us at Offscript, the home of bold cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.